Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. A lot of small businesses avoid trade shows because they cost too much, but exhibiting is also a great way to build your brand, meet new customers, and strengthen the relationships you've already made. Maybe you're a startup business that has never exhibited before, or maybe you've managed a show before but didn't produce the results you expected. We're going to explore some of the best practices for putting on a profitable show. In the first of two parts today, we have a guest so experienced at producing trade shows, she is affectionately known as the Booth Mom. Please welcome Candy Adams. Hi, Candy.
Hi there. How are you today?
We are great. I have to ask you, Booth Mom is not just a nickname, it's a registered trademark under your name. How did that come about?
Well, way back when I started in the industry in the early 90s, one of my booth staff nicknamed me his Booth Mom. And he said he'd had booth Nazis.
Oh, God.
But his other word was booth bitches. Okay.
Yeah.
But he'd never had an exhibit manager who really cared about the staff's overall morale. Because we all know that it's tough duty.
It is.
Nobody ever cared about their accommodations, their comfort, and working a really grueling booth schedule sometimes. So he looked at me as his booth mom. And after that, he never called me by my name again. He called me, "Hey, booth mom." And so when I went freelance back in 96, helping exhibitors who didn't have a full-time exhibit manager in-house, I decided that really the name Booth Mom was my brand because I really nurtured my exhibit staff, but also teaching exhibitors best practice like moms teach their kids. And I'm also a frugal steward of company assets. I look for value, but I never spend a penny where I don't have to.
So what does a booth mom do?
Number one, I look at myself as the mama bear. I protect my clients because there are a lot of unscrupulous people out there in our industry who look for the rookies and literally prey on them going, well, they don't know how much it should cost because there isn't like a book that says, okay, you should pay this much an hour for this or you should pay this much for this exhibit. So literally, I'm there to, number one, protect my clients, but also lead them through what I call the trade show maze. Do they understand their target market? Do they understand the brand they want to portray to them? Do they understand the shows where they're going to find those people? What kind of an exhibit will literally be their face at that show and display their brand? And then what's their key message to the people who come to their exhibit? What will their exhibit staff say to those people when they're asked, well, what do you do? And then what are they going to get out of the show when it's over? Because it is a big investment.
Those sound like great questions to ask if you know you're going to exhibit. But if you're a startup, say, and you've never exhibited before, what's the thing you should ask yourself as to whether or not I should exhibit at all?
Well, the first thing is, who are you trying to get to?
Right.
And how are you going to find them? Are they somebody who's going to go out and read banner ads? You know, I work with one group that does walkers. And I'm talking the thing that you see grandma sort of hunched over and going along with her tennis balls, on the front.
I need one of those, right.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, how are we going to get to them? And we have found out that the not B2B, but B2C, business to consumer expos, where the seniors go to find all these new things. We have found ones for caregivers. And we were having trouble figuring out because these aren't people who spend an awful lot of time on the internet, which seems like the way everybody's, hoping to market these days, through social media and that type of thing. So for us, it was sort of a no-brainer. And then people saw us who are in the B2C. If you think of the people that are running the assisted living facilities and that kind of thing, they needed these things after somebody had had a hip replacement. They needed them after the person had taken a fall and had broken bones and needed to ease back into walking. So we found a number of ways to get to them where we couldn't do it any other way than finding trade shows.
So what are some of the biggest mistakes that people make pre-planning a show? From my own experience, I've been at shows where people aren't necessarily looking, even though they might be in the right target market, but they may not be wanting to buy the product or service that the exhibitor is selling at that particular time.
Well, you have to look at why are you going to the show. And I always tell people the first thing when they ask me, why should I exhibit? And I said, I look at three different things. We're looking for return on investment, return on objective, and return on relationship. The return on investment is, Are you actually going to be able to sell product there? Is that your main goal? And what are you going to sell? How much are you going to be able to sell of it at the show? And is that enough to make it worth your while? But most people don't go just to sell. And they usually don't even truthfully sell on the show. They start building a relationship. This is the beginning of what I call the sales continuum. So they often go to meet new people. But if you look at return on objective, what are your marketing objectives for going to a show? Is it to educate your audience that you have a new product? Is it to get to the press because you know that this is something that the press will pick up on because you've got a great story behind it? I mean, this walker, the man built it for his wife, and he had been one of my former CEOs, and there was nothing on the market that would help his wife walk. She was to the point of being bedridden. So we had a great story.
Yeah.
So there, it turned out to be that we could get to the press in ways that nobody else had picked up. I mean, we had a 78-year-old booth babe, and it was his wife. So, and then are you looking at going to recruit? I have a couple of universities that I work with that recruiting is a big part of it. I've had focus groups in my exhibit where people weren't really quite sure where do you find the people who are going to buy your product. And so we have done focus groups. So there's a lot of marketing objectives. And what are you doing for branding and awareness? You guys are all about branding. Where else are you going to go to get out your message, your name, who you are, what you stand for? Where are you going to get that 3D opportunity other than a trade show? And last, return on relationship. What are you doing to get to the people you already have a relationship or want to make a relationship with? Is this the VIPs at the show, the speakers at the show? I've done defense shows where it was totally political of being there. You had to be there. Is it going there to meet your current customers? And I tell people, don't spend all of your marketing dollars on giveaways for people you don't know. How about saying thank you to customers who you have the potential to build an ongoing relationship with and to upsell? So, ROI, ROO, ROR, 3 reasons to go to a show. But until you have solidified those in your mind and prioritized them, you shouldn't spend your first penny.
Right. How does outsourcing someone like yourself help when you're actually at the show?
Most people don't know what actually happens on the show floor unless you've been there.
Right.
You don't know that when you get there, your freight may or may not be in your booth space. It may or may not have been delivered. It may have not been delivered in good shape.
Yeah, that's kind of a nightmare, isn't it?
Well, I was working with a company that I've done CES for now 18 years in a row, and they were going into the show in Vegas, and some nice fork truck driver had driven through the booth graphics with his forks.
Oh, my goodness.
Making big Swiss cheese holes that were just the right size to put a sticker over that said fragile, handle with care. So we could not see the holes until we opened the crate, pulled the graphics out, and went, we can't use these.
Wow.
So who have you got that's going to be there and be quick enough on the draw to know? I already had the backup copies up online in the cloud that I could download to have those things all reprinted overnight and have them up the first morning of the show.
Yeah, that pays for itself right there,
Yep. Who's going to be there to watch the labor?
Right.
When they say, hey, I'm just going to get a ladder, and they don't come back for an hour? Who's keeping track of all of the paperwork on site and signing off on it? And making sure that fork truck driver who came and lifted the top on your exhibit actually wrote down the nice number of hours before he just slid a piece of paper under your nose and said, sign here. And then I audit all the bills. And my favorite story is online, on site at a show. And it was down in New Orleans. They had a new person working at the service desk who was auditing the inbound weight slips. And they not only billed us for the weight of our freight in the trailer, and it was not a full truckload. We didn't own the whole truck. We owned part of it. They billed us for the tractor, the trailer, what they call the gross weight. And if nobody would have caught it, my client would have signed off for 10,000 pounds more because they did not know.
Oh,
that would
boy.
have been $10,000.
That would
And
have been
I
awful.
figure 75% of the bills that somebody presents me at a show are erroneous and not in my client's favor.
Wow.
So they're looking to trick you?
Yes.
Wow.
Right now, I'm in the middle of an audit for a company that has 13 divisions. They spend $8 million a year on trade shows, and I have not found a time card yet that they've presented me on the first 2 audits that I'm doing at 2 shows. There's not one time card that's correct to what they billed us. Some are underbilled, most of them are overbilled, but it's a matter of who's watching the bottom line and do your people really have time to do it?
Well,
And make
exactly, because you're
sure,
there to do a number of different things like sell product, recruit. You
yes,
don't really think about all that detail that has to go into this.
All the behind the scenes people aren't sending staff that got Candy's expertise. They're sending the sales crew or the marketing crew or that type of thing.
right. And who's watching? Was that done on straight time or overtime? I mean, I've got one show every year that falls over the Veterans Day holiday, and different unions have different rules on, do they take the holiday on the actual day or do they move it a day to when the parade isn't in their town that they want to participate in. I have one union that actually claims Super Bowl Sunday.
Wow.
Different unions have different rules, and you have to understand. I mean, I'm planning a show right now in Chicago for a company from China who has no clue that we have 10 unions at McCormick Place in Chicago.
Yeah, that's
And
a lot
how
of
do you
union.
coordinate them to be in your booth at the right time? So you see that your labor guys, the guys with the tool belts that are actually putting your exhibit together, aren't going to be ready for that multi-stage forklift at the time when everybody had thought it would be. So you have to get your butt up to the service desk and cancel it and set a new time and hope that your guys will be ready for it. So then they can do the next part. Because having these guys stand around, I mean, I'm looking at right now what I did over the weekend. We're talking $130 an hour. I'm looking at San Francisco, over $250 an hour per man I am paying for labor.
You've been doing this for 40 years. How many
Yep.
years did it take you to kind of run through like every little problem that comes up at a trade show, because you have such a wealth of knowledge of things to look out for? Or are you still
There
learning?
is never, I am still learning every
Right.
show I go to. So this last show I did I was, close your eyes, Candy. What convention center were you in? I was in Dallas. And this is funny. I can close my eyes and look at what's the front of the building look like and then know where I was at. I was in Dallas, and the guys that were rolling up the carpet after the show literally ran it up against the front of my information counter that was all LED lights around the edge, ripped
Oh,
the
wow.
LED lights off and ripped the laminate off. And I had to take pictures and do an insurance claim. That one had never happened to me before.
Right.
So, I mean, every one of these is a whole new ball game, and it depends on the unions, the union stewards. What will they let me do? I mean, in Chicago, even if they have no labor available, I can't loosen the wing nuts on my crate to get ready for my guys to come.
Isn't that frustrating?
But
Yeah.
now, one of the tricks that I read about you and your bio on your website is never underestimate what a nice plate of homemade cookies can do. Tell us a little bit
Oh, yeah.
more about that trick.
Well, I've always been a baker. I mean, in 7th grade, I was in the Buttons and Bowls 4-H club in Ohio, and I've always loved baking. And I found out after doing my first show and taking candy bars that those little candy bars didn't cut it. So I started baking homemade cookies, and I take about 40 dozen homemade cookies to every trade show, and I call them my friend makers. Yeah, and I do 2 or 3 kinds of brownies. I actually have people who send me their recipes and ask me to bake their cookies and bring them, and I do. But I generally do oatmeal. I do the little peanut blossoms, which are the peanut butter ones with the chocolate chip in the middle.
Right?
I do chocolate chip with and without nuts because I have to, be nice to the people who have the nut allergies. And then I do a turtle brownie. I usually do a peanut butter brownie. And I do a soft buttermilk sugar cookie. And they all go in those little snack bags, and I can put 2 nice sized cookies in each bag. And I go around and I deliver these to the show manager, to the people at the service desk, the people at the freight desk.
Great bribe.
Have them there for my labor guys. I have had labor crews show up with a cooler with glasses and milk, gallons of milk.
So I imagine your wing nuts get loosened a little bit quicker than everybody else's, and when you need that extra
Yes.
extension cord,
Yes.
It's never a
I don't
problem.
On my
know
way.
for it. They come back, they bring their friends over on break and go, could my friend have a cookie? He's homeless. Because I don't know if you know it or not, but there are 3 levels of labor in every convention center. You have the A labor, those are your journeymen. They're at the top of the pay rate.
Right.
Then you have your apprentices, they're still learning, they're in the middle pay rate. And then they have the people that are not even union members. And I call it a shallow labor pool, where they don't anymore have enough people who are willing to work just part-time, which is what, these guys do. That they work for 3 or 4 days getting the show ready, and then they take the 3 days off of the show and come back and tear it down. So it's not a full-time job for most people. But there are a lot of people who are street people, homeless, who come and they are what are known as the sea laborers, and they are just basically the grunt work. They don't really understand the construction, but they're the guy who's going to be muscling the stuff around your exhibit. And a lot of them don't come with a lunch pail.
Right.
So, ballpark, Candy, how many shows do you do a year?
Any place from probably 8 to 12. I have some clients who have me do nothing more than the background work where I don't go to the show, but where I'm actually on show site, probably about 6 a year. And then I do a lot of training and writing too.
Let's talk about the training. And my point of wanting to know how many shows you did, if you're doing 40 dozen cookies before each show and doing all the stuff that you do, I don't know how you get everything done in 1 year.
Well, can I tell you, I've got it
kind of
down
amaze
to a
me.
science.
Right.
The night before, I set out all the ingredients, and I have a large island in my kitchen, which is why I bought the house I'm in. And then I basically have everything lined up. I use air-baked cookie sheets. I can basically slide all the cookies on and off of those off of parchment paper. And I have the little squeeze things like an ice cream scoop. And I can bake all of those cookies, have them packaged and weighed in my suitcase in about 9 hours. And it's the day before I leave. I actually ship my clothes ahead if I have more clothes than will fit in my second suitcase. And I usually fly Southwest, so I don't have to pay.
Right, for the extra bag.
Regarding training, you would think most management knows its products and services better than anyone else. So, what kind of training do you provide at a trade show?
Or before.
Well, there's two parts to it. And one part is what I call the orientation. And this is once the people are on site, they don't walk into the exhibit and know it inside out like the people who planned it with me, what I call my stakeholders. So the guys working in the exhibit, the gals working in the exhibit, they aren't the stakeholders. They don't know why we put this over here and why that's over there, and where you're going to find the giveaways and what happens if the lead scanner goes down. They don't know all those things. So you really need to do an orientation to get them ready. And this isn't where you talk about the confidential product information or what specials are we going to have. Here's not where we talk about what are our, and I call them the scripts, because I equate a trade show to basically going to a play. We have built you a stage. You're the actors, but we've got props for you. You know, we've got graphics, we've got video, we've got all these tools. And if you don't know what your script is, what are you going to say when the guy walks up toward you in the aisle? You see his eyes go up to your graphic that says why you're there, what your differentiator is of your product. Now, how do you open that conversation? This isn't what these guys do every day. So you have to get them ready to have those scripts like the icebreaker. Okay, then they go, well, tell me more about your company. What do you do? Well, there you have to have your elevator speech.
Right.
Or what's new? I know your company, but what's new? So you have to have your what's new elevator speech. Then you have to have your qualifying questions. Then you have to have a 3-minute presentation based on what they said they wanted to know. Then you have to be able to recap it and say, okay, you said you're interested in this, this, and this. Could we get together? And literally, most people aren't comfortable with that close of how do you close it out and get the commitment for the post show, because you're not there to sell. All you're there is to tease them into a meeting. Don't want to give them everything. And too many people give away the whole store and there's no reason for another meeting. And then how do you get that information down in the lead system? How do you prioritize it? Is it 1 to 5, A through F? And I have people all the time who think a 5 rated lead is better than a 1. Other ones want a 1 to be better than the 5. How do these people learn all this? How do you disengage with those, as I call them, the lonely people of the world, the trick-or-treaters who come around with a bag and all they're there for is your tchotchkes?
Oh, that's so good.
And this is what I cover in a combination of orientation and boothmanship training. Because you've only got one competitor on that show floor, and that competitor is time. You've only got X amount of time with that person. And how many people walked by, because they figure a lead at a show costs between $250 and $350 for a qualified lead. So if you look at an average $300, every time you're talking to guy A in your booth, guys B, C, and D walked by because there was nobody else available to talk to them.
Right.
How do you open up your circle and invite those people in? I teach that. How do you basically break up what I call the closed circle or the booth huddle, where everybody's talking to each other in the booth, your staff, and ignoring the aisle? Yep. So how do you do that? And I empower, I deputize, as I say, everybody in the booth. If you see a booth huddle, you go up and you say the word Cha-ching. Cha-ching means $300 just walk down the aisle while you were looking the other way.
Okay, well, I'm sold. I mean, we need to have that training. You
Yeah.
also offer some help or tools to help exhibit managers produce better results. Can you tell us what some of those tools are that you offer on your website?
Well, I have everything from a survey that anybody who calls me and asks, "What should we do at a show?" I go, "Okay, let's back up and go, what do you want out of the show? Let's back into it." And we talk about the history that they've already got, what went right, what went wrong, what do they want to do differently. I've got a survey. I've got forms that help you walk through your first show in chronological order, and you can check off and you can assign people to the different duties with dates. So it's actually like a project management template. I've got show plans that when you get the show kit that comes from the show manager, and it has information about the venue. It has information about the show manager's rules and your contract with them and all the contractors, the laborers you're going to be dealing with in the unions. How do you pick out what's important to share with all the people who are stakeholders on your team? That's what I call a show plan. You can also do a total budget, looking at everything I have ever spent money on at a trade show.
You know, Candy, I used to, not even used to, I still have a checklist of what to do when I know I'm going to handle press at a trade show and what all needs to
Yes.
happen before that happens. And it is a pretty long list. So I can imagine these forms are really extensive.
Yeah, and most of them, truthfully, over the years, I used to do a article in the late 90s for Exhibitor Magazine, the only magazine for exhibitors, not the suppliers, but the actual exhibitors in the booths, called Form and Function. And it was basically how to drive the functionality of your exhibit through forms. Most of these go way back with Exhibitor, and then they changed it over to an Exhibiting 101 column. And all of these, if you go to exhibitoronline.com and put in Candy Adams, all of these articles from the last probably, I want to say 2012, come up. So there's a whole lot of this information out there. And on my website, I've actually got a resources page where you just go out and click a link to find these articles. And I have to say, Exhibitor is much more creative with headlines, the titles of the articles than I am. And sometimes they didn't really make sense to me if I were looking for something on, let's say, material handling or install and dismantle labor. So I actually put those things on my website in parentheses of what I see as the meat of the article, if you're looking for it by keyword.
That's great. We're in the world of ROI today, right? So what kind of cost
Yes.
savings have you achieved for a company after they've hired your services?
Well, I was on the show with my client from Saudi Arabia, who is a university there, who literally love them to death. They say they're going to solve the world's problems, and that's their goal of this university. You have to do your thesis on solving a world problem. But I was building their exhibit, and the people from Singapore came over and said, "How come you got your exhibit done first?" And I looked at them and said, "Have a cookie?"
I was going to say cookies.
And they had worked with a general contractor on this show, and there were a number of things that did not go well in their favor that they were billed for that I wouldn't have paid for. I would have disputed. They paid $140,000 for an exhibit that the next year I took 50,000 off of it, and that 50,000 was above and beyond even my fee for doing the show and being on the show floor with them for 11 days.
Wow.
And these people literally were doing branding and awareness on a new conference over in Asia. And the things that they were charged for were they had one supercomputer in their exhibit that required 208 power. That's 208 volts, and that is about the size of, let's say, my ring finger. That's how big it was. And the general contractor informed them that they had to build a 14-inch riser and build their entire exhibit up on it, build ramps into it for the Americans with Disabilities Act, all of these crazy things that were just totally not true.
So can I ask what it costs to outsource someone like yourself?
Well, I am at $140 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my clients tell me I save them more than I cost them in these kind of errors and what they don't end up paying and an increased ROI. I mean, I will work for people if all they want to do is pick my brain on strategy and what should they do at their show. I have a 4-hour minimum at about twice my hourly rate. And so if somebody just wants that kind of advice, I can do it. But I love getting in with exhibitors when they're building their exhibit. If I'm in there at the beginning and doing the RFI and RFP to select exhibit houses to build these, I can save a whole lot of money before we ever even pick what shows you're going to.
No question.
Yeah, I believe that.
So what's the most important single piece of advice you can give an exhibitor?
Can I have 2 words?
Two
Yes,
words?
You can. Yes, you
You can have
can.
as many words as you like.
Strategize, prioritize. If you look at your strategy, why are you going, and you don't do anything without keeping focused on that strategy of what do you want out of ROI, ROO, and ROR, then prioritize your spending. If I gave you 2 rolls of pennies, if I gave you $1 and said, okay, we're going to basically have 4 piggy banks, and you have piggy banks for branding and awareness, and that's your ROO, your ROR. Why are you going? What are we going to put in these 4 piggy banks? And what are we going to get out of it? Because I say if you don't feed the pig, you're not going to get the bacon.
That's right.
And I love bacon.
I do too.
Everything's better with bacon.
Form follows function. So start with your strategy and know why you're going, know what's going to have to happen in that exhibit before you ever talk to an exhibit house, because they will sell you something that's totally aesthetically pleasing, but functionally sucks.
Right. Well, my guess is, Candy, there's going to be people who have a lot of questions for you. So what's the best way to connect with you?
Truthfully, call me. I'm on West Coast time. I'm up as of 6 a.m. You can call me anytime until 10 p.m. Well, no, actually, I'm real active on LinkedIn. I mean, if you want to get more advice and know what I think is important in the industry, you can link up with me on LinkedIn, and I am the Booth Mom out there. I'm also on Twitter as Booth Mom. But the best way is basically you can go to my website, boothmom.com. I've got a contact page. Start some questions there with me. I will send you links. I'll set up a time to talk to you. You can email me at Candy Adams, no dot in between them or anything, at boothmom.com. Whatever you're comfortable with. Start a conversation, and I'm happy to help answer questions. I tell anybody who's ever been in one of my classes, and I've literally taught tens of thousands of people at Exhibitor Show in 22 years of teaching there. I teach any place from 15 to 20 hours annually at Exhibitor Show. There is nothing that I won't share. I'm one of the most giving people in the industry.
I believe it.
I want to see everybody look back after a trade show and say, wow, that was worth it.
You know what? And I bet you could talk for hours and still have information that people still need to know. You are a wealth of information, and I thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great.
Well, and stay in touch. If you'd like to get me and an exhibit house going back and forth on one of these calls, I'd love it.
Maybe we'll do that. Thanks, Candy. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And if you have any comments about today's show or any questions for Dan and myself, please feel free to reach out to Dan and me on our LinkedIn pages. Your support helps us grow, so we'd love to have you take a minute to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice. And we hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.